Alrighty guys, welcome to the video here today for college football week 7. And of course, this is the 2022 season. And my name is Brock Page. I've been doing sports picks for free right here on YouTube since 2016. I also sell my personal sports bets on patreon.com/BrockPage. And if you want to see which one of these free picks on this video that I'm actually betting on personally, the link for my college football tier package bets is in the description section below. And with that, guys, let's go ahead and dive into some free content. We're going to take a look at Louisiana squaring off against Marshall, 7:30 Wednesday night on October 12th, 2022. Marshall's minus 9.5, totals 47. Now, the Herd's been playing some super tough defense this season. They're allowing 16 points a game, and they've got a top 3 rush defense in the country. Beau Plan leads the D with 34 total tackles. Meanwhile, Stephen Gilmore and Micah Abraham, they have 6 interceptions between the two of them. They're facing a Cajun team who lost their last 3 straight, and they've had little success moving the football. These guys are actually in the bottom 25 in the country in total offensive yards per game. Now, when it comes to the total, the Cajuns saw their last 2 straight fall under the line. Meanwhile, the Herd went 4-1 to the under in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Marshall, minus 9.5, under 47. Next ball game, Baylor at West Virginia, 7 o'clock Thursday night on October 13th, 2022. Baylor's minus 3.5 on the road, totals 54. Now, Baylor's allowing just 20 points a game, and they have a top 20 rush defense. Al Walcott's got 31 tackles on the season, along with a couple of PBUs. Meanwhile, running back Richard Reese on the other side of the ball, he scored 7 times on the ground, and he averages nearly 6 yards a carry. Now, he's facing a West Virginia defense who struggled in certain games. They're currently allowing 30 points a game, and they've had a tough time forcing turnovers. Now, total-wise, West Virginia saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line. Meanwhile, Baylor saw their last 2 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Baylor, minus 3.5, over 54. Next ball game, Temple, UCF, 7 o'clock Thursday. Central Florida's minus 24, totals 46.5. Now, the Knights have won their last 3 straight. And they do a great job running the football. These guys are gaining over 250 yards a game on the ground. Meanwhile, defensively, the Knights are allowing only 14 points a game. Jason Johnson has over 40 tackles on the year. They're facing a Temple team who has one of the worst offenses in the country. These guys are in the bottom 10 in the nation in total yards per contest. When it comes to the total in this one, the Owls are 4-1 to the under in their last 5. Meanwhile, UCF saw their last 4 straight fall under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward UCF minus 24, under 46.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Navy taking on SMU, 7:30 Friday night. And of course, that's October 14th, 2022. SMU's minus 13.5, totals 56. Now, the Mustangs have some serious problems on defense. Not only did they lose their last 3 straight, they allowed 34 points or more in all of those losses. The Mustangs are currently 106th in the country in rush defense. They're facing a Navy squad who gains over 230 yards a game on the ground, and they're going to run it 90% of the time. Meanwhile, defensively, the midshipmen are allowing just 21 points a game. And they're led by Jacob Busick, who has 4 sacks and a couple of forced fumbles from that defensive line. Now, total-wise, Navy did see 2 out of their last 4 get over the number. Meanwhile, SMU saw their contest a few weeks ago against TCU fly over the total. I'm going to lean toward Navy plus 13.5, over 56. Next ball game, it is going to be Utsa taking on FIU, 8 o'clock Friday night. Now, Texas San Antonio is minus 32 on the road, total 63.5. But as good as the Roadrunners of Utsa have been on offense, this is a mighty big number to be laying with their shaky D. These guys are in the bottom 20 in total yards allowed. They've also had a real tough time defending the pass. They're facing a Florida International team here today, or not today, but on Friday, who's pretty bad themselves. But they are throwing it for 225 yards a game, so they can move the football, not incredibly efficiently, but they do have the ability to throw it. Now, total-wise, 3 out of the Panthers' last 4 ball games fell under the number. Meanwhile, Utsa's most recent outing against Western Kentucky fell under the total as well. I'm going to lean toward Florida International plus 32, keeping this one close, under 63.5. All right, next matchup, little Saturday action. I'm talking about Penn State at Michigan. 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Saturday, October 15th, 2022. Michigan's minus 6.5, totals 53. And speaking of the total in this one, Michigan saw their last 3 straight all fall under the number. Unders against the likes of Indiana, Iowa, and Maryland. As a matter of fact, the Wolverines are 5-1 to the under for the entire season. Meanwhile, Penn State saw their last 2 straight fall under the total themselves. And if you want to see whether I'm betting on the money line or against the spread in this one, this game's being featured as one of my college football tier package bets on my website. And the link for that bet is in the description section below. But as far as making a free pick is concerned, I'm going to lean toward the under 53 in that game. Next matchup, it is going to be Auburn at Ole Miss, 12 o'clock East. Ole Miss is minus 14, totals 54.5. Now the Ole Miss Rebels, they're coming off a 52-28 beatdown of Vandy last week. These guys have been one of the best running teams in college football. They've got a top 10 rushing offense, and they're led by the combo of Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans. These guys have scored 14 touchdowns on the ground between the two of them. They're also averaging 175 combined rushing yards per game. They're facing an Auburn team who lost 3 out of their last 4. They have a tough time slowing down the run. The Tigers are actually 93rd in the nation in rush defense. And even if they do figure it out defensively, they may not score enough points to get the W. They've been held to 17 points or less in their last 4 straight. Now, total-wise, 3 out of Auburn's last 5 fell under the line. Meanwhile, Ole Miss went 3-1 to the under in their last 4 themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Ole Miss minus 14, under 54.5. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Kansas taking on Oklahoma, and that's going to be a 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Oklahoma's minus 7.5, total 63. And for a team laying a touchdown here, the Sooners have played some pretty bad defense this year. And unfortunately for Sooner fans, Oklahoma's rush defense has really let them down. They're in the bottom 10 in the entire country in slowing down the run. They're facing a Kansas team on the other side of things who not only averages 40 points a game, but they also run for over 210 yards per contest. The Jayhawks are gaining just about 6 yards a carry, and they scored 16 times on the ground this year. Now, when it comes to the number, Kansas saw their last 3 straight fall under the line. Meanwhile, Oklahoma went 4-2 to the under in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Kansas plus 7.5, under 63. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Iowa State at Texas, 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. The Texas Longhorns are minus 16, totals 49.5. Now, the Longhorns won 3 out of their last 4, and they're one of the best covering teams in the Big 12. Texas has gone 5-1 against the spread this year, and they're doing a bang-up job on the defensive side of the football. The Longhorns are allowing only 17 points a game, and they're led by Jalen Ford, who has 58 big tackles on the year. Meanwhile, offensively on the other side of the football, Bijan Robinson has scored 10 times already on the ground. He's also averaging well over 100 yards a game rushing. Now they're facing an Iowa State team on the other side of things who's on a 3-game skid, and they really have problems moving the chains. These guys have a bottom 20 rush offense. When it comes to the scoring, both schools have gone 4-2 to the under in their last 6, respectively. I'm going to lean toward Texas minus 16, under 49.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Minnesota taking on Illinois, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Minnesota's minus 6.5, totals 39. Now, I get that Minnesota has an incredible rushing attack, and they have arguably one of the best defenses in the country. That said, though, it's actually Illinois who's allowing fewer points a game than any other scorer in the nation. These guys are allowing only 8 points a game, and they're in the top 3 in fewest yards allowed. The Illini have 21 sacks already, and they're led by Keith Randolph and Seth Coleman, who have 7.5 of those sacks between the two of them. Meanwhile, offensively, it's going to be real tough to slow down Chase Brown and the boys. Chase is averaging nearly 150 yards a game on the ground. Now, scoring-wise, Illinois has gone 4-1 to the under in their last 5. Meanwhile, Minnesota saw their last 2 straight stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Illinois plus 6.5, under 39. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Colgate taking on Army, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. This game is currently off the board. And as bad as Army is this year, they do have a win over an FCS school in Villanova. They actually beat Villanova 49-10 back on September 17th. So they are taking care of, business against these lesser quality schools. And as usual, guys, the Black Knights rush for a boatload of yards per game. Now, Colgate on the other side, they lost their last 3 straight. They allowed over 31 points a game during that stretch. Not sure what this number is going to open up at, but I think Army should be able to cover it. I'm going to lean toward Army getting the job done against the spread. Next matchup, little Maction for you. I'm talking about Central Michigan taking on Akron, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Central Michigan's minus 13.5, totals 58. And even though the Chippewas lost their last 3 straight, it really does feel like they're a lot better than Akron. They've actually got a top 30 passing offense in the country. Daniel Richardson's thrown for nearly 1,600 yards, along with a dozen touchdown passes. They're facing an Akron defense who's one of the worst in the country in slowing down the aerial attack. These guys have a bottom 10 pass defense, and they're allowing 41 points a game. When it comes to the total, the Zips did see 3 out of their last 4 get over the number. I'm going to lean towards Central Michigan, minus 13.5, over 58. Next ball game, Miami, Ohio taking on Bowling Green, and that's going to be a 12 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Miami, Ohio is minus 6.5 on the road, totals 47. Now, Miami covered in 3 out of their last 4, and they garnered outright victories over the likes of Kent State and Northwestern. This Red Hawk defense is doing a nice job keeping these guys in ball games. They're actually limiting their opponents to just 88 yards a game rushing. Ryan McWood's currently leading the charge with 53 tackles, along with an interception. They're facing a Bowling Green squad who has a tough time moving the sticks. These guys have a bottom 15 rushing offense. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side, they're allowing nearly 500 yards a game of total offense. Now, total-wise, BG has gone 5-1 at the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Miami, Ohio, minus 6.5, over 47. Next ball game, it is going to be Old Dominion taking on Coastal Carolina, 12 o'clock Eastern start time. Coastal's minus 12.5, totals 56. And even though the Chants have remained undefeated, they failed to cover in 4 out of their last 5. Now, the Chanticleer defense is also having a tough time stopping the pass. They're in the bottom 15 in the nation in passing yards allowed. They're also facing an ODU offense who throws for over 250 yards a game. Wide receiver Ali Jennings, is averaging over 135 yards a game, and he scored 6 times. Now, total-wise, ODU saw overs against the likes of Liberty and ECU. Meanwhile, Coastal saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line, throwing out that UL Monroe game. I'm going to lean toward Old Dominion plus 12.5, over 56. Next matchup, it is going to be Miami, Florida, taking on Virginia Tech, 12:30 p.m. East. The Miami Hurricanes are minus 7.5 on the road, totals 47 and a hook. And even though the Canes lost their last 3 straight, they do have the ability to push it downfield. They're in the top 25 in yards per game. They're throwing for over 315 yards per contest. Meanwhile, defensively, Cameron Kitchens has 3 interceptions from that Hurricane secondary. They're facing a Virginia Tech squad who lost their last 3 straight themselves. And they covered the number only 1 time this year. The Hokies are averaging only 20 points a game offensively, and they're in the bottom 25 in rushing. Now, total-wise, VT's 5-1 at the under this year. Meanwhile, Miami saw 3 out of their last 4 stay under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Miami minus 7.5, under 47 and a hook. Next ball game, it is going to be Buffalo taking on UMass, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Buffalo's minus 16.5. Total is off the board. No total posted as of yet. Now, Buffalo's on a 3-game winning streak, and they're one of the better covering teams in the country. They come into Saturday's game with a 5-1 record against the spread, with big covers over the likes of Maryland and Coastal Carolina. Now, the Bulls are averaging 30 points a game, and they're led by Mike Washington and Ron Cook, who actually combined for over 120 yards rushing a game between the two of them. Now, they're facing a UMass team on the other side of things who lost their last 3 straight. They garnered only 1 win all season. That lone win came against some school called Stony Brook. But anyway, the Minutemen are averaging only 12 points a game, and they're dead last in the NCAA in passing. They're throwing for just 70 yards a game through the air. I'm going to lean toward Buffalo minus 16.5, getting the job done against the number. Next matchup I have for you, it is going to be Cal taking on Colorado, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. Cal is minus 14 on the road, totals 48.5. Now, the Golden Bears covered in 2 out of their last 3, and they're doing a pretty nice job on defense. They're allowing only 22 points a game, and they're led by Jackson Sermon, who's got 44 tackles and a couple of sacks. They're facing a winless Colorado team who hasn't covered a point spread yet. This Buffalo defense is allowing over 43 points a game. They're dead last in the nation in stopping the run. They're actually allowing over 300 yards a game on the ground. Now, total-wise, Colorado's 4-0 to the over in their last 4 straight. Meanwhile, Cal saw overs against the likes of Arizona and UC Davis. I'm going to lean toward Cal minus 14, over 48.5. Next matchup I have for you, it is going to be UConn squaring off against Ball State, 2 o'clock Eastern start time. Ball State's minus 9.5, totals 46. Now, believe it or not, I actually think that Ball State may run into some trouble on defense. They're in the bottom 20 in the country in stopping the run. They actually rank 102nd in the nation in total yards allowed. They're facing a UConn team who does nothing but run the football themselves. That's one of the few things they actually do right. These guys are gaining nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. Meanwhile, defensively, Jackson Mitchell has a staggering 75 tackles already. Now, when it comes to the number, UConn's last 2 outings both fell under the total. Meanwhile, Ball State went 3-1 to the under in their last 4. I'm going to lean toward UConn plus 9.5, keeping this one close, under 46. Next matchup I have for you, it is going to be Vanderbilt taking on Georgia, 3:30 p.m. East. Now, the Georgia Bulldogs are minus 38.5. totals 58 points. Now, the undefeated Bulldogs are in the top 5 in yards per contest offensively. Stetson Bennett's throwing for nearly 300 yards a game, and he's thrown only 1 interception this season. Meanwhile, defensively, the Bulldogs are allowing only 10 points a game, and they're in the top 10 in the country in fewest yards allowed. Now, they're facing a Vandy offense who's been little threat throwing the football this year. The Commodores are actually ranked 100th in the country in passing yards per game. Meanwhile, defensively, on the other side of the football, these guys couldn't stop Division II East Stroudsburg. They're second to last in the country in passing yards allowed per game. When it comes to the total in this one, Vandy's going 5-1 to the over in their last 6. Meanwhile, Georgia saw 2 out of their last 3 get over the number themselves. They could possibly put this over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Georgia, minus 38.5, laying the big number, over 58. Next matchup I have for you, everybody's got eyes on this one. I'm talking about Alabama taking on Tennessee, 3:30 p.m. East. Bama's minus 7 away from home, total 65.5. And speaking of the total in this one, the Crimson Tide saw overs in 2 out of their last 4 ball games. Overs against the likes of Arkansas and UL Monroe. Meanwhile, Tennessee saw 2 out of their last 3 get over the line themselves. Overs against the likes of Florida and Akron. And if you want to see whether I'm betting on the money line or against the spread in this one, this game's being featured as one of my college football tier package bets on my website. And the link for those plays is in the description section below. But as far as making a free pick is concerned, I'm going to lean toward the over 65.5 in that ball game. Next matchup, little Big 12 action. I'm talking about Oklahoma State at TCU, 3:30 p.m. East. TCU's minus 3.5 at home, totals 68. Now, unfortunately, guys, I can't give you a free pick in this one. This game's being featured as my 3rd and final college football tier package bet on my website. But if you want to see whether I'm betting on the money line against the spread or on the total in this one, there's only one way to find out, and that's to sign up for my college football tier package bets on my website. And once again, guys, the link for that play is in the description section below. All right, next ball game, little ACC action. Should be a good one. Talking about NC State at Syracuse, 3:30 p.m. East. Syracuse is minus 3, totals 44.5. Now, the undefeated Syracuse Orange, well, they failed to cover only 1 time this year. They're also playing some of the toughest defense in the entire nation. These guys are allowing only 14 points a game. They're in the top 10 in the country in fewest yards allowed. Michael Jones has a team best 33 tackles along with a couple of sacks. Meanwhile, Garrett Williams has 30 tackles and a pair of interceptions. Now, offensively, Syracuse is running for nearly 200 yards a game, and they average over 38 points per contest. They're facing an NC State offense who has a tough time moving the football themselves. These guys are actually 91st in the country in offensive yards per game. They're also having a pretty hard time covering the number. NC State failed to cover in their last 3 straight. Now, total-wise, 2 out of the Wolfpack's last 4 ball games did fall under the posted total. Meanwhile, Syracuse saw their last 2 straight fall under the total themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean towards Syracuse minus 3, under 44.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Arkansas taking on BYU, 3:30 p.m. East. Now, Arkansas is the 1.5-point favorite on the road, total 63. And even though Arkansas has had a rough couple of weeks, they can certainly run the football with the best of them. Raheem Sanders is rushing for over $1.15 a game, and he scored 5 times already on the ground. Now, this Razorback offense actually ranks in the top 25 in total yards per contest. They're facing a BYU defense who has a tough time slowing down the run. They're actually in the bottom 30 in the nation in rush yards allowed per contest. Now, the Cougs also failed to cover the point spread in their last 4 straight outings. And when it comes to scoring, BYU saw 3 out of their last 4 get over the total. Meanwhile, Arkansas is 5-1 to the over this season themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Arkansas -1.5 over 63. And with that, guys, I'm going to take my first break of the video. Long podcast here today with these college football videos. So I'm going to take a quick couple-minute break here, rest the pipes, and, get a drink of water. All right, goodbye. All right, thanks for that break, guys. I really appreciate that. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, unfortunately, when you're married and you see a bug in the house, you have to kill it, because if the wife sees it, she kind of loses her mind. And then you end up having to kill it anyway. So you might as well, just nip it in the bud and kill it. Now, I don't like killing stuff, but we'll take care of that later. But anyway, I'm sure you've fast forwarded through that anyway, so you probably didn't even see that happen. But yeah, it was a bug, and I had to kill it. Happens, sometimes you get bugs in the house. Now, where'd be 25. I don't remember covering these games. I lost my spot in the script here. We just did Arkansas. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be a good one. You're going to be you're going to feel very fortunate that I came back for this one. Because I'm talking about Gardner-Webb taking on Liberty, 3:30 p.m. East. This game's currently off the board. The 5-1 Liberty Flames are scoring a whole bunch of points. And they're doing a real nice job beating up on these horrible teams. Running back Day Hunter is gaining nearly 100 yards a game on the ground, and he averages 6 yards a carry. Meanwhile, defensively, the Flames have 23 sacks in just 6 ball games. They're facing a Gardner-Webb team who lost 4 out of their last 5. They allowed 34 points a game in those losses. I'm going to lean toward the Liberty Flames getting the job done against the number. Next matchup, little Big Ten action. I'm talking about Maryland at Indiana, 3:30 p.m. East. Maryland's minus 10.5, total 60. Now, the Terps are 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 ball games. They're scoring a considerable amount of points this year. Maryland's averaging 34 points a game, and they're in the top 20 in passing offense. Talia Tungavaloa, he's completing over 74% of his passes. He averages nearly 300 yards a game. When it comes to defensive play, the Terps are allowing just 22 points per contest. They're facing an Indiana team who's doing a poor job of running the football. These guys are in the bottom 10 in the country in rush yards per game. Meanwhile, defensively, they've done a horrible job slowing down the pass. They rank 118th in passing defense. Now, total-wise, 3 out of Indiana's last 5 did get over the line. Meanwhile, Maryland saw overs against the likes of Purdue and Charlotte. I'm going to lean toward Maryland minus 10.5, over 60. Next ball game, some more action. I'm talking about Northern Illinois taking on Eastern Michigan, 3:30 p.m. East. Eastern Michigan's minus 2.5, total 66 and a hook. Now, the Eastern Michigan Eagles are starting to hit their stride here a little bit. They won 3 out of their last 4. And they averaged 32 points a game during that span. Running back Samson Evans, he's averaging over 100 yards a game on the ground. He scored 6 times already. They're facing an NIU team who allows over 38 points a game themselves. And they rank in the bottom 30 in total yards allowed. When it comes to the total, NIU saw all 6 of their ball games this year get over the line. Meanwhile, Eastern Michigan went 4-2 to the over in their last 6 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Eastern Michigan minus 2.5, over 66 and a hook. Next game, Kent State taking on Toledo, 3:30 p.m. East. Toledo's minus 8.5, total 61. Now, Toledo has actually shown some real poise over the past couple of weeks. Having said that, though, they've been little threat throwing the football. These guys rank 106th in the country in passing. They're facing a Kent State team who covered in 3 out of their last 5 themselves. Golden Flashes are also doing a nice job of running the football. These guys are gaining over 200 yards a game on the ground. Now, receiving-wise, Dante Cephas is averaging over 100 yards a game. When it comes to the total, 2 out of Toledo's last 3 did fall under the number. Meanwhile, Kent State went 4-1 to the under in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Kent State plus 8.5. Under 61. Next ball game, it is going to be Ohio at Western Michigan, 3:30 p.m. East. Western Michigan's minus 1.5, totals 59. Now, the Broncos lost 3 out of their last 4. They've had a real tough time moving the football. These guys are throwing for just $180 a game through the air. They also rank in the bottom 15 in the country in total yards per contest. Now, they're facing an Ohio team on the other side of things who actually has little problems throwing the football themselves. As a matter of fact, the Bobcats currently have a top 10 passing offense. Curtis Rourke is throwing for nearly 325 yards a game and has 14 touchdowns compared to just 2 interceptions. Ohio also got the W in 2 out of their last 3. They averaged 46 points a game in those contests. Now, total-wise, the Bobcats are 5-1 at the over in their last 6. Meanwhile, Western Michigan saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Ohio plus 1.5, over 59. Next contest, it is going to be Texas State taking on Troy, 3:30 p.m. East. The Troy Trojans are minus 15, totals 48.5. Now, Troy's on a 3-game winning streak, and they've done a real nice job covering the number. These guys are 5-1 against the spread in their last 6. They've also done a real nice job throwing the football. These guys currently find themselves in the top 20 in the country in passing yards per game. Meanwhile, defensively, on the other side of the football, the Trojans are allowing only 20 points per contest. TJ Jackson's the team leader in sacks with 5.5 of them. They're facing a Texas State team who's had a tough time moving the sticks themselves. As a matter of fact, these guys are currently dead last in the nation in rushing yards per game. Now, total-wise, 3 out of Texas's last 5 fell under the line. Meanwhile, Troy saw 2 out of their last 3 stay under the total themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Troy, minus 15, under 48.5. Next contest I have for you, it is going to be Charlotte squaring off against UAB, 3:30 p.m. East. Now, Alabama, Birmingham, UAB, they're minus 23.5, totals 62. Now, the Blazers have been real tough to throw the football against. They have a top 15 pass defense, and they're allowing only 16 points a game. Meanwhile, offensively, the Blazers really like to pound the football. These guys are in the top 10 in the country in rush yards per game. Dwayne McBride, he's rushing for over $125 per contest, and he scored 9 times on the ground. Now, McBride's also averaging over 7 yards per carry. They're facing a Charlotte team on the other side who's won just 1 ball game this year. And, well, they have a defense for the record books, but not in a good way. These guys are allowing more points a game than any other team in Division I. They're also allowing nearly 550 yards a game, just total. Now, when it comes to the number, Charlotte saw their last 5 straight all get over the number. No real surprise there. Meanwhile, UAB saw their last 2 straight get over the line. I'm going to lean toward UAB, minus 23.5, over 62. Next ball game, Western Kentucky taking on Middle Tennessee State, 3:30 p.m. East. Now, Western Kentucky's minus 7, total 68. Western Kentucky, they covered in 4 out of their last 5 ball games. And they're scoring more points a game than a lot of teams in D1. The Hilltoppers are averaging 41 points per contest, and they have a top 3 passing offense. Austin Reed's throwing for 340 yards a game and has 19 touchdowns. Meanwhile, wideout Daywood Davis, he's averaging just about 100 yards a game receiving as well. They're taking on a Middle Tennessee team who's got one of the worst passing defenses in the game. They're 119th in pass yards allowed. The Blue Raiders also lost their last 2 straight, and they gave up over 41 points in both of those losses. Now, scoring-wise, MTSU went 4-0 to the over in their last 4. Meanwhile, Western Kentucky went 3-1 to the over in their last 4 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Western Kentucky, minus 7, over 68. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be JMU taking on Georgia Southern, 4 o'clock Eastern start time. JMU's minus 10.5, total 66. Now, the undefeated James Madison Dukes are scoring over 44 points a game. They rank in the top 20 in total yards per contest. Meanwhile, defensively, these guys are allowing fewer yards a game on the ground than any other team in college football. Taurus Jones has 38 tackles on the year. Meanwhile, Jalen Walker has a pair of interceptions, including a pick 6. They're taking on a Georgia Southern defense who's had a real tough time in slowing down the run. They're allowing over 225 yards a game on the ground. They're also in the bottom 15 in total yards allowed per contest. Now, when it comes to total, Georgia Southern saw overs against the likes of Georgia State, Nebraska, and Morgan State. Meanwhile, JMU saw their last 4 straight all get over the total. I'm going to lean toward James Madison, minus 10.5, over 66. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Wisconsin at Michigan State, 4 o'clock Eastern start time. Wisconsin's the 7-point favorite on the road. Total's 48.5. And even though I kind of hate this number in a road conference game, it does look like the Badgers are clearly the better ball club right now. Their defense is allowing only 19 points a game. They currently rank in the top 25 in fewest yards allowed. Now, Nick Herbig, he leads the pass rush with 5 sacks on the year. Meanwhile, Mema Nongmeta is the team leader in tackles. Now, they're facing a Sparty team on the other side of things who lost their last 4 straight, and they failed to cover in all of those losses. Now, the Spartans are also having a tough time moving the football. They're currently in the bottom 30 in the country in total yards per game. Now, scoring-wise, I don't see the Spartans moving it all too well here against this Wisconsin defense. Sparty's also 4-2 to the under for the entire season. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, the Badgers saw unders against the likes of Washington State and Illinois State. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Wisconsin, -7, under 48.5. Next matchup, Tulane taking on South Florida, 4 o'clock East. Tulane's the 12.5-point favorite on the road. Totals 54 points. Now, the Green Wave's been one of the better covering teams in college football. They're 5-1 against the number in their last 6. They've been doing a great job defending the pass. Tulane's allowing just 13 points a game. They have a top 5 pass defense in the country. Dorian Williams, he's also leading the charge with over 40 tackles on the year. Now, they're facing a USF team on the other side of things who's had little success throwing the football themselves. Matter of fact, these guys are throwing for under 170 yards a game. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the football, well, the Battling Bulls, they just can't seem to stop anybody. They rank 125th in total yards allowed. And when it comes to the number, 2 out of the Bulls' last 3 ball games fell under the total. Meanwhile, Tulane went 5-1 to the under in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Tulane, -12.5, under 54. Next ball game, it is going to be Louisiana Tech taking on North Texas, 4 o'clock Eastern start time. North Texas is -6.5, total 71. Now, the Mean Green's in the top 20 of the nation in total offensive yards per contest. Io Adei and Oscar Adaway, they've combined for nearly 150 yards a game on the ground together. Now, Adei's actually averaging over 7 yards a carry as well. They're facing a La Tech defense on the other side, who's one of the worst teams in the country in stopping the run. They're actually allowing over 225 yards a game on the ground, and they currently rank in the bottom 10 of the nation in that category. Meanwhile, offensively, these guys have done very little to establish the run. They're actually 119th in rush yards per contest. When it comes to the total, the Bulldogs went 4-1 to the over in their last 5. Meanwhile, North Texas saw their last 4 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward North Texas, -6.5, over 71. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Arizona squaring off against Washington, 5:30 p.m. East. Now, the Washington Huskies are -15, total 72.5. Now, this should be a fun one to watch here today. Both teams with very powerful offenses. And it's the Washington Huskies who are actually in the top 3 in the nation in passing yards per contest. Michael Penix is throwing for over 340 yards a game, along with 16 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, they've combined for nearly 1,000 yards receiving between the two of them. Now, the Huskies are facing an Arizona team who does allow over 34 points a game. They're not awfully stout on defense. They're also in the bottom 25 in the nation in yards allowed per game. Now, when it comes to the total, Washington's 6-0 to the over this year. Meanwhile, Arizona's gone 4-2 to the over in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward the Washington Huskies, -15, over 72.5. Next matchup I have for you, it is going to be Rice taking on Florida Atlantic, 6 o'clock East. FAU's minus 3.5, totals 55 and a hook. Now, this definitely feels like a trap game, but I have to fade the struggling Owls of FAU. We got the battle of the Owls here today. But anyway, Florida Atlantic, these guys are on a 3-game skid. And they're in the bottom 30 in the country in yards allowed. Now, they're facing a Rice team who covered the number in their last 4 straight. They have outright wins over the likes of UAB and Louisiana. Luke McCaffrey and Bradley Rosner, they're averaging over 125 yards a game receiving between the two of them. When it comes to the number, Rice has gone 5-0 to the over to start the year. Meanwhile, FAU saw overs against the likes of North Texas and Ohio. I'm going to lean toward Rice, plus 3.5, over 55 and a hook. Next game, LSU taking on Florida, 7 o'clock Eastern kickoff in the Swamp. Florida's minus 2.5, totals 49 and a hook. And when it comes to these types of rivalry games, you can really throw record and stats out the window. Now, the one thing I do know is it's quite difficult to play in the Swamp. Now, the Gators already got the W in 3 out of their last 4 ball games. And in addition to that, they're having little issue running the football this year. The Gators are actually averaging well over they're averaging over 6 yards a carry, and they've rushed it into the end zone 16 times. Now, they're facing an LSU team who was just embarrassed by Tennessee 40-13. Now, the Tigers have also failed to cover in their last 2 straight. And they average only 17 points a game during that very short span. And when it comes to the total, should be kind of like a war of attrition in Gainesville. The Tigers of LSU, they're 5-1 to the under thus far in the year. What was that? The Tigers or the Gators? I think it's the Gators who are 5-1 to the under thus far in the year. Our script's all messed up for this one, guys. LSU, they saw 3 out of their last 5 fall under the line as well. One thing that you should know, plenty of unders between these two teams, regardless of where the unders and who they belong to. Give me Florida minus 2.5, under 49 and a hook. Man, that was bad. Bad read there. Spitting everywhere. Podcast is a complete mess. Next game, Utah State, Colorado State, 7 o'clock Eastern start time. Utah State's minus 10.5, totals 47. But for a team laying double digits on the road here, the Aggies really don't play a whole lot of defense. They're allowing 35 points a game, and they took the loss in 4 out of their last 5. Now, offensively, the Aggies have certainly had their issues throwing the football. Not only are they averaging just 20 points a game, they rank 104th in passing. They're facing a Colorado State team who's coming fresh off a huge upset win over Nevada last week. They actually held the Wolfpack to just 14 points in the win. Jack Howell's leading the D with 45 tackles, along with 3 interceptions. Total-wise, Colorado State's 5-0 to the under thus far in this season. Meanwhile, Utah State went 4-2 to the under in their last 6. I'm going to lean toward Colorado State plus 10.5, keeping this one close. Under 47. Next ballgame, UL Monroe taking on South Alabama, 7 o'clock East. South Alabama's minus 16.5, totals 52. Now, the SALA Jaguars are 4-1 to start this season. They failed to cover only 1 time during that stretch. And aside from scoring 35 points a game on average, the Jags are playing some really tough defense. They're in the top 20 in stopping the run. They're allowing only 18 points a game. Now, this defense has 13 takeaways, and they're led by Trey Kaiser and Jaden Voisin, who have over 50 tackles between the two of them. Now, they're facing a ULM squad who lost 3 out of their last 4, and they rank in the bottom 30 in yards per game. They're actually throwing for just 187 yards per contest through the air. And defensively, well, they're allowing over 35 points a game. Now, scoring-wise, I do think the Warhawks are going to have a tough time moving the football. They're also 4-2 to the under in their last 6. Meanwhile, South Alabama, they saw their last 2 straight fall under the line. I'm I'm going to lean toward the South Alabama Jaguars, minus 16.5, under 52. Next matchup, Arkansas State taking on Southern Miss, 7 o'clock East. Southern Miss is minus 3, totals 54.5. Now, the Golden Eagles have been really good against the point spread this year. They're 4-1 ATS in their last 5, with covers over the likes of Tulane, Miami, and Liberty. They're facing an Arkansas State team who allows 32 points a game themselves, and they have a terrible time defending the pass. Matter of fact, these guys are in the bottom 25 in the nation in pass defense. When it comes to the total, 3 out of the Red Wolves' last 4 did get over the number. Meanwhile, Southern Miss saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line. I'm going to lean towards Southern Miss, minus 3, over 54.5. And with that, guys, I'm going to take my next and final break for the video. Give me a couple minutes. I'll be right back. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate that break. Like I said, you got to take a couple breaks when you do a podcast like that, and you're literally ranting and doing nothing but talking for an hour straight. Like you have nobody else to talk during the video to rest your voice. And so anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our final leg of the video. And our next game should be a good one. I'm talking about Clemson at Florida State, 7:30 p.m. East. Now, Clemson's minus 3, totals 50.5. The undefeated Tigers have covered in their last 2 straight. And they're doing a great job of slowing down the run. Matter of fact, Clemson's allowing only 66 yards a game on the ground. Trent Simpson's leading the charge with 38 tackles along with a couple of PBUs. Meanwhile, offensively, the Tigers are averaging just about 40 points a game. They're facing a Florida State team who's on a 2-game skid themselves, with both of those losses coming against ACC opponents. As a matter of fact, the Noles averaged just 19 points a game in those 2 losses I just mentioned. Now, defensively, it looks like Florida State's having a tough time slowing down the run. They actually rank 88th in the country right now in rush defense. When it comes to the total, the Noles saw their last 2 straight stay under the number, 4-2 to the under in their last 6. Meanwhile, Clemson, on the other side of things, they saw unders against the likes of Boston College, Furman, and Georgia Tech. I'm going to lean toward Clemson -3, under 50.5. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Mississippi State taking on Kentucky, 7:30 p.m. East. Mississippi State's -7 on the road, totals 46.5. Now, the Bulldogs are on a 3-game winning streak, and they actually find themselves 5-1 against the spread overall for the year. Covers against the likes of Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Memphis. And aside from averaging nearly 40 points a game, this Mississippi State offense throws for over 350 yards per contest. Will Rogers is completing 72% of his passes, and he's thrown for 22 touchdowns. Meanwhile, defensively, the Bulldogs have forced a dozen turnovers already. Now, they're facing a Kentucky squad who lost their last 2 straight, with both of those losses coming against SEC opponents. The SEC. Come on, man, spit it out. They also averaged just 16 points a game in those losses as well. Kentucky's biggest issue this year is their inability to run the football. They're actually in the bottom 10 in the nation in rush yards per contest. When it comes to the total, Mississippi State did see overs in their last 3 straight outings. I'm going to lean toward Mississippi State -7, over 46.5. Next matchup I have for you is going to be Stanford taking on Notre Dame, 7:30 p.m. East. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are -15.5, totals 53. Now, the Irish should be able to take care of business here. They're on a 3-game winning streak, and they're playing some pretty tough pass defense. As a matter of fact, these guys are limiting their competition to just 194 yards a game through the air. Jack Kaiser is currently leading the charge with 30 tackles on the year. Now, they're facing a Stanford team on the other side of things who lost their last 4 straight, and they actually do very little to slow down the run. These guys are allowing over 200 yards per contest on the ground. Now, when it comes to the total, the Irish saw their last 4 straight all get over the number. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Notre Dame, -15.5. Over 53. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Nebraska at Purdue, 7:30 p.m. East. Purdue's -13.5, totals 58. Now, Purdue's proven to be one of the better throwing teams in the nation. They have a top 25 passing attack, and they're led by receiver Charlie Jones, who's averaging over 100 yards a game receiving. Now, Jones also has 7 touchdown grabs, but it's not just all offense in Purdue this year, guys. These guys have a top 20 rush defense as well. They're facing a Nebraska team who's done a pretty poor job on defense themselves. The Cornhuskers are in the bottom 30 in defending the pass. They're also allowing nearly 200 yards a game on the ground. When it comes to the total, Nebraska saw overs against the likes of Georgia Southern and Northwestern. Meanwhile, Purdue's 4-2 to the over on the year themselves. I'm going to lean toward Purdue, -13.5, over 58. Next ball game I have for you, it is going to be Memphis at ECU, 7:30 p.m. East. ECU's -4.5, total 61. Now, the Pirates are 4-2 against the spread overall for this season, and they're doing a nice job of throwing the football. These guys are averaging well over 300 yards a game passing, and they're also in the top 20 in total yards per game. Isaiah Winstead and C.J. Johnson, they've combined for over 1,000 yards receiving already, along with 9 scores. And they're facing a Memphis squad who's got one of the worst pass defenses in the country. These guys are allowing over 300 yards a game through the air. Now, they also failed to cover in 3 out of their last 4 ball games. When it comes to the total, Memphis went 5-1 of the over in their last 6. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, East Carolina saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line. I'm going to lean toward ECU minus 4.5, over 61. Next ball game, it is going to be USC taking on Utah, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. Utah's minus 3, total 64. Now, the Utes are coming fresh off a double-digit loss to UCLA. They also lost to Florida in the season opener. They're taking on an undefeated USC team who's been playing some incredibly tough defense this year. The Trojans are allowing just 18 points a game. And in addition to that, they're limiting their opponents to only 198 yards a game through the air. Tuli Tuipulotu leads the country with 7 sacks on the year. He also has 21 tackles and a couple of PDs. When it comes to offensive production, USC is scoring over 40 points a game, and they rank in the top 30 in passing. Now, total-wise, 3 out of USC's last 4 did fall under the number. Meanwhile, Utah saw unders against the likes of Arizona State and San Diego State. I'm going to lean toward USC plus 3, under 64. Next matchup, New Mexico taking on New Mexico State, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, the visiting New Mexico Lobos are minus 6.5 on the road, totals 37.5. Now, the Lobos have actually done a pretty nice job covering the point spread this season. They're 4-2 against the number, and they're actually playing some really solid defense. New Mexico's giving up only 22 points per contest. They have a top 30 rush defense. Cody Moon has 47 tackles along with 3.5 sacks. Now they're facing a New Mexico State Aggies team who's just 1-5 on the year and really struggles moving the football. Not only are the Aggies averaging just 14 points a game, they're also in the bottom 5 in the nation in total yards per contest. Now when it comes to the total, the Aggies are 4-2 to the under for the entire season. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Lobos saw unders against the likes of LSU, UTEP, and Maine. I'm going to lean toward the New Mexico Lobos minus 6.5, under 37.5. Next ball game, some more West Coast action. I'm talking about, it's not West Coast, it's ACC action. I'm talking about North Carolina squaring off against Duke, 8 o'clock East. UNC's minus 7, total 66. Now, I don't think Duke has enough firepower to keep up with the 5-1 Tar Heels. UNC scoring over 42 points a game. And they're in the top 10 in total yards per contest. Quarterback Drake May is throwing for over 315 yards per contest. And he has 21 touchdowns through the air. Now, they're facing a Duke team who ranks 84th in the country in defending the pass. When it comes to covering the point spread, the Blue Devils failed to cover in 3 out of their last 4. Now, total-wise, Duke saw overs in 2 out of their last 4 ball games. Meanwhile, North Carolina saw overs against Notre Dame, Appalachian State, and Florida A&M. Give me UNC minus 7, over 66. Next game, Wazoo, Oregon State, 9 o'clock East. Oregon State's minus 3 at home, totals 52.5. Now, the Oregon State Beavers are averaging 33 points a game, and they're led by wideout Trayshawn Harrison, who's averaging over 14 yards per reception. Now, the Beavers are also facing a Washington State team who really struggles slowing down the pass. These guys are 102nd in pass defense, and they took the loss in 2 out of their last 3 ball games. When it comes to running the football, Washington State's in the bottom 15 in the nation in rush yards per contest. Now, when it comes to total, Wazoo's 5-1 to the under for the entire year. Meanwhile, Oregon State saw unders versus the likes of USC and Boise State. I'm going to lean toward Oregon State. The Beavers -3, under 52.5. Next ball game, Air Force UNLV, 10:30 p.m. East. The Air Force Falcons are -9 on the road, totals 51. But despite being favored by nearly double digits on the road here, Air Force, they've had a tough time covering the point spread. They failed to cover in 3 out of their last 4. And as always, they are no threat throwing the football. They run it 1,000,000 times a game. Now they're facing a UNLV team who's 4-1 against the number this season themselves. And they actually do a nice job defending the run. Austin Agiaki is the team leader with over 50 tackles, along with a couple of picks. And speaking of interceptions, this Rebel defense has 11 picks on the year already. Now, total-wise, the Rebels saw overs against the likes of New Mexico, North Texas, and Idaho State. Meanwhile, Air Force is 4-2 to the over for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward UNLV +9, over 51. Next contest I have for it is going to be San Jose State taking on Fresno, 10:45 East. Now, the San Jose State Spartans, they are -8 on the road, totals 48 points. And even though the Spartans are the clear-cut favorite here, I'm not so sure they're going to cover this number here on the road. They do have a tough time running the football. They're actually in the bottom 25 in the country in rushing yards per game. And if they want to throw the football, well, Fresno State on the other side, they have a top 30 pass defense in the nation. That's one of the few things they actually do well. Lavelle Bailey, he has 36 total tackles on this season. Now, total-wise, Fresno State saw 3 out of their last 5 fall under the line. Meanwhile, San Jose State went 4-1 to the under in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Fresno State +8, under 48 points. With that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup for the video. It is going to be Nevada taking on Hawaii, 11:59 East. Nevada's -6, totals 48 and a hook. Despite being on a 4-game skid, the Nevada Wolfpack's facing a Hawaii team who's just downright bad. These guys are scoring only 16 points a game, and they rank 117th in total yards. Meanwhile, defensively, these guys have one of the worst rush defenses in the game. They're allowing 235 yards per contest on the ground, along with 41 points a game. Now, they're facing a Nevada team who actually plays some pretty good pass defense. The Wolfpack's allowing only 207 yards a game through the air. They also have 14 takeaways on the season, and most of that is thanks to Bentley Sanders. The defensive back is first in the country with 5 interceptions on the year, and he also has a pair of forced fumbles. Now, total-wise, Nevada saw 2 out of their last 3 stay under the number. Meanwhile, Hawaii's 4-1 to the under in their last 5. I'm going to lean toward Nevada, -6, under 48 and a hook. And with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and jump into our quick pick recap. I like Marshall -9.5, under 47. Baylor -3.5, over 54. UCF -24, under 46.5. Navy +13.5, over 56. Florida International +32, under 63.5. I like the under 53 in the Penn State-Michigan game. Give me Ole Miss -14, under 54.5. Kansas +7.5, under 63. Texas -16, under 49.5. Illinois +6.5, under 39. Give me Army getting the job done against the spread. Central Michigan -13.5, over 58. Miami, Ohio -6.5, over 47. Old Dominion +12.5, over 56. Miami, Florida -7.5, under 47 and a hook. I like Buffalo -16.5, getting the job done against the number. Give me Cal -14, over 48.5 points. I like UConn +9.5, under 46. Give me Georgia minus 38.5 over 58. I like the over 65.5 in the Alabama-Tennessee game. Now, I have no free pick available for the Oklahoma State-TCU game. That's being featured as one of my college football tier package bets on my website. Give me Syracuse minus 3 under 44.5. Arkansas minus 1.5 over 63. Liberty getting the job done against the spread. Maryland minus 10.5 over 60. Eastern Michigan minus 2.5 over 66 and a hook. Kent State plus 8.5 under 61. Ohio plus 1.5 over 59. Troy minus 15 under 48.5. UAB minus 23.5 over 62. Western Kentucky minus 7 over 68. James Madison minus 10.5 over 66. Wisconsin minus 7 over 48.5. Tulane minus 12.5 under 54. North Texas minus 6.5 over 71. Washington minus 15 over 72 and a hook. Rice plus 3.5 over 55.5 points. Florida minus 2.5 under 49 and a hook. Colorado State plus 10.5 under 47. South Alabama minus 16.5 under 52. Southern Miss minus 3 over 54.5. Clemson minus 3 under 50.5 points. Mississippi State minus 7 over 46.5. Notre Dame minus 15 and a hook over 53. Purdue minus 13.5 over 58. ECU minus 4.5 over 61. USC plus 3 under 64. New Mexico minus 6.5 under 37 and a hook. North Carolina minus 7 over 66. Oregon State minus 3 under 52.5. UNLV plus 9 over 51. Fresno State plus 8 under 48. With my next and final free pick for the video, I'm going to lean toward Nevada minus 6 under 48.5 points. And with that, guys, that's going to do it for me. Gotta thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. And with that said, guys, happy week 7 to you. Best of luck to you. And I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at patreon.com/BrockPage.